Hello, and this is gonna be a bit of story time about my experiences in D&D and some character experiences that have, some of my characters, some of my friends' characters have done. Uh, you can ignore this if you don't play D&D or don't know how to play. There's just like some technical details that I'll explain a few bits later on. So the first bit is Jarrgohn Draculier, the first vampire. He was a tough fight for the party because they've been having a good time with some really powerful characters. So I let them relish it for a while, then I set him against them. They were crushing the artificial vampires, who were made from Jarrgohn's blood. So when they first met him, he made an impression because, well, they were invited to join the vampires, the artificial vampires, and one of them actually accepted, but the thing was, while one of them accepted, he's mentioned later on, uh, while one of them accepted, it, let's see, they didn't, everyone else refused, although weren't obvious about it, so they didn't get killed right then and there. They had to, well, they decided we gotta stop him from getting away because he really scared them. The best parts of the fight with the Jarrgohn were his turn, because he had legendary actions where pretty much he could take another turn on someone else's turn. It wasn't much, but it was still pretty powerful. But on his turn, would flatten a player or building in one go, and then move on. So it took them a while, but they found out how to survive him. Run and heal. Don't fight him unless you have no other option you can take. So after about 3 or 4 rounds of just trying to stay alive, an ally, the captain, and who was a temporary ally for this fight, pulled out their special weapon, a handheld bazooka of sorts, the Ripper. As you see here, it's pretty much a reusable nuke. Did a lot of force damage, pretty rare type of damage. They fired it into Jarrgohn's chest, and he stopped healing, but only for 20 rounds, which is a lot of time, but they had been really heavily weakened by throwing the most powerful attacks against him in. So, after all, they took him down, and he managed to get knocked unconscious. But that wasn't it, though. He was still alive and awake. Well, not awake, but he was still functioning. So let me just show you stat block. So you saw this part already. Just scroll down a bit, so. And then let me show you his, these were his legendary actions. And this is his spell book. So the next threat was the artificial vampires trying to recontain him. The players were terrified because they'd had enough of the vampires trying to, well, contain him, because the last time they'd fought him, when they just did, a bunch of the vampires' attendants they'd been previously had re-emerged from him. So pretty much there was one named Yagi. They had a really tough fight with her originally when she was still alive, an artificial vampire. Then they defeated Yagi, and she emerged from Jarrgohn as an even bigger threat. So they had to get into a large argument, as the vampire legions want to just go back to normal, forgive and forget. The players were understandably ticked, but after a brief argument, Jarrgohn regained enough health slash sensibility to drain the paradox, explained below, and he accidentally died from the paradox's poisoned blood. Now this guy was really fun. I introduced him early on as a living wall of fog, and the players were intimidated immediately. This was the first group. The second group, just like, I cast Fireball. And for those of you who don't know, that's a powerful spell. and rolled quite a bit of damage for just a third level bit. That's a pretty nice amount if I'm recalling correctly. He took only 7 damage, and they're like, "Oh crap!" And I said like he has like you know, like one of his hair's a little scorched, and they're like, "Oh." I had so the captain never made a sound, spoke, or anything like that, because he was emotionless, silent, and immensely deadly. I had him hunt down the players several times, and the best part was that no matter what they did to him, he was a challenge. His tactics always explained a lot of this because, well, they'll explain a lot of this. So see, right there. So these are the allies he had. This is the other bit of his tactics. Feel free to pause whenever you do. Did I say that earlier? Oh, that was probably a previous attempt to make this video. So yeah, the captain was not interested really in winning, and he was interested in just ending a battle. Either way. So these are his information. This is information. I didn't give him his breath weapon here because it didn't make sense for him to have it. And when in mist form, he had to fly 500-foot speed, which was pretty fast. But when he's in his normal form, he can only fly 60 feet, which is still pretty fast. I mean, pretty deadly. These are his attacks. And these are his abilities, like regeneration, shape-shifting, because he's a werewolf vampire. He can jump really fast and high. He has magical punches and kicks and bites and stuff. He had a pretty increased critical rate range, so yeah. He had telepathy, but he never used with them either, so. Oh, and this was fun. So the way I did it was, if you hit him with a silvered weapon, he was resistant to it. If you hit him with a magic weapon, he was resistant to it. In order for him to be not resistant to it, you had to hit him with one of those silvered and magical. So he was pretty much impossible for them to fight. These were his legendary actions, by the way. He was pretty much able to hold Jarrgohn off on his own for a little while after one of the players nearly fell. And the paradox. Annoying or funny? That was the real question for him because he was arguably my best villain ever. He was hilarious though, which I think might be an incidental factor in that because no one took him seriously, which is kind of funny. No one took him seriously, but he was the deadliest monster I'd made in a way. He was the deadliest thing I'd ever made, and no one took him seriously. Which I think is part of the reason he was so dangerous. No one could defeat him, but he could be anywhere and nowhere at once. So this right here, he couldn't be multiplexed at once, but he get in between them the instant you lost sight of him. So this is a funny bit. So they're on a circle facing out, and he just popped in the center circle and tapped him on the shoulder like, "Hello, you there? What's up?" And it was really funny because they weren't looking in the center of the circle. So the first group actually had a bit of a slow reaction to him because they were like, "He's not that big of a threat," because they managed to kill him pretty quickly. But I was like, "You saw how fast he healed, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but he couldn't do any damage to us." I'm like, "Okay." They thought the fact that he could teleport, well, not teleport, they thought the fact that he could get anywhere he wanted to and just couldn't be stopped meant, but couldn't do any damage really, meant that he wasn't a big threat. The other group almost joined the vampires because he was just so funny. The Paradox is a really fun guy to play. Here's his abilities, by the way. This is my favorite ability of his. I never really got to use it, though. So when my first group of players found out that the Paradox could defeat Jarrgohn for good with the sacrifice of his own life, they were pretty excited. But the second group was surprised and a bit divided because they wanted him as an ally. The first group was excited to finally get rid of him because they'd learned eventually that he was a problem. He made a lot of missions much more difficult. They succeeded, and boy was it satisfying for them as Jarrgohn drained them. Afterwards, the two groups found out the Paradox was gone for good, and now Jarrgohn was his original self. A helpful, righteous paladin, cleric, wizard of an age long past. And that mission was a lot of fun. So these are just a bunch of stories I have about different casters and stuff, or different classes. There's a monk, a wizard, and a warlock story. Then I'll have something about like different levels and their difficulties and stuff. So there was a Way of the Shadow monk who was trying to escape from 3 dragons, and they succeeded. The way that worked was they could turn invisible, and the dragons were trying to hunt them down in the middle of the night because they could only turn invisible if they were in dim light or darkness, and it was the middle of the night. Granted, there were street lights because it was Baldur's Gate, so they had to make a stealth check to see around it. For the record, I did not want them to do this, but I was fair, so they got away. On the plus side, there was just the one monk, so the rest of the party was holding off the 4th dragon and the boss, a player character stat block Warlock. The monk got away, but the rest of the party got defeated in like one go. And after that, they had to go recover a captured party member because it was pretty entertaining. And the Warlock, this was actually from the one with Jarrgohn. This Warlock here was the one who actually joined the vampires, Volix. He used a really powerful spell, Maddening Darkness, to just flatten the party after nearly knocking 2 of them unconscious. Then he snuck off with the last dragon that he had and a party member who'd managed to get out of Maddening Darkness. Basically, Maddening Darkness creates darkness, both cackles and screeches and screams. The party was humiliated and recovered by another group quickly, but their morale was heavily shaken. This next bit, though, is about a wizard. So I've heard a lot about wizards being far too powerful, like they can handle anything, or they can do anything. It's a common complaint, but far, far more incorrect than I can say. So, like, I had a level 15 evocation wizard. They're the embodiment of damage for wizards, fighting a boss with an allied healer, also level 15, while the rest of the party stayed back and provided cover fire. They were also really far back. They were not on the front lines. There was a few tanks in front of them, pretty much. Wizard got flattened. They were flanked. They got flanked by the thing that went around. It was like stomped over them. So the rogues just kept on sneaking up, shanking, and running away. That again was Jarrgohn, but I've done the same myself on myriad occasions. Jarrgohn just walked right up, got stomped on the monk, pretty much knocked them unconscious. So the healer had to go up and heal the monk. And while it happened, he smacked the healer to the side, a paladin, and then proceeded to go for the wizard, who was doing a lot more damage than he was happy with. So, if you think wizards are overpowered, there are several points. Ones that I use to make sure that I can make a challenging fight for them. 1. Anti-magic field. Any wizard below 17th level will not be able to cast any spells, and any other one only has 1 shot to do something. 1 spell total for an entire encounter or longer. So, if you make a passive effect that can do that, I forgot to put the variant in, but basically, if you're doing the mana system, I believe is what they called it, where like you have spell points, they're wasting a lot of spell points just casting out those spell slots for basic spells, so that's it. You've easily beaten them. The other one is, the second point is damage. Wizards below 17th level can't get Wish, and therefore can't heal. So, if you injure them and isolate them from the healer, plane shift, shove them to a demi-plane, and destroy the key, etc., then they can't heal. And while they can prepare for injuries, any attacks that break their shields is an injury that they cannot undo. 3. Give them something they can't fight, and they can't get around it. You can't put Dispel Magic on a mechanical spout, or anything like that. Seriously, like a poison or acid spout, they can't block it up if it's made of acid, and if you put multiple in or make it big enough, they can't block it up, period. The acid will dissolve the fabric if it's acid, and if it's poison, then they can't block it up because of how big it is, or if there's enough of them. This one's going to be a bit controversial, I bet, because Warlocks are rightly hailed as versatile and diverse, but in my experience, they have been the highest steady damage dealers. I had a Warlock named Aethernox Nightsoul. He went by Eth. He was a fallen Aasimar. He 1v1'd Baba Saga's Creeping Hut for 4 rounds at 8th level. The rest of the party was doing really poorly because Lysaga had attacked him with a powerful spell, or they had to slam him to the ground. But Eth, oh boy. I mean, I showed the math somewhere around here. Yeah, right there. The math's right here. He nearly single-handedly killed the hut with powerful spells and used Eldritch Blast. So, as a side note, I know some people dislike having Eldritch Blast on a Warlock because it feels generic or it should be more diverse. But what if you get it for someone like a fighter or a paladin or something, and they want Eldritch Blast because they have magic initiate? You can easily flavor it to something else. So I didn't change the effects, but I changed how I cast it. And I'll include some examples below. Eth pretty much just clenched this is also how I did Fireball. He pulled one of his fingertips into his palm, and then flicked the blood droplet at his foes. Blood magic. The molten blood exploded on hits. So, this is also how explains the math for his fighting Baba Lysaga's hut. The other guy's doing pretty well, but yeah. I don't think I did all the math here right, but yeah, that's teach damage roll. So yeah, there's a detail on how much damage it does. So then there was Exekai. He took over an entire town on an evil campaign. He conjured miniature black holes of antimatter, which he hurled at his foes. Each black hole's damage was the sphere constricting the target's body and causing it to slightly implode if it hits. He got about 800 souls from making deals with people. Then there was Razar, my Hexblade Warlock, for Descent to Avernus. He was a Hexblade, so he relied mostly on his sword. Or, not sword, but his pact weapon. He summoned tendrils of red energy which would arc out from his shoulder blades or his hand and would impale the target. Then they'd retract, sort of like a scorpion's tail in a way. I guess that's how you think about like a stinger tail. Like it will go sing into the body, then retract. Razar had like 1 or 2 max Eldritch Invocation bonuses, but the rest of the invocations were for his pact weapon. The invocations were like the Agonizing Blast, which increases his damage, or they were for things like slowing his foes that can't get away from him. And the other things were like he preferred to run up to his target and hit them with his summoned maul or greatsword or great axe made of conjured obsidian. He used Eldritch Blast if he couldn't get to someone, or if he was trying to get to someone. So, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about here. Something I've noticed is people who think that level 20, the capstone if you're a personal friend and don't play D&D, is overpowered. These people in question seem to prefer to have low-level games, which is respectable. I don't disagree with you there. Not saying it's not a viable argument, but for a good game, but levels 10 to 20 or 15 or higher, they're all equally viable. My first point, only for this. At low levels, the players are far more fragile. For instance, at level 1, most monsters could theoretically one-shot a player with a single critical hit, and a single bad roll on a player's end can end that character. Even at 5th level, a good enemy can really end the party if they're not prepared for it. And I know it's true of the higher levels too, but it's really a lot more true at the lower levels because they have way less tools to deal with it. Second point, at higher levels, if a player critically fails an attack or ability check, or an enemy critically hits them, then they'll take a large amount of damage, but they won't die right off the bat. They won't take that much damage. They have a wider margin of error, which brings me to my third point. In my experiences as a demon player, at low levels, you have a low, like nearly non-existent margin of error. With this margin, if you, player or dungeon master, break it, if not the entirety of the party dies. At high levels, you barely have to hold back, and your players don't need any help to fight. Because the thing is, if you don't give your players a challenge, they're going to feel like you're coddling them. That means that at low levels, your players aren't going to get a good challenge. You don't know how to challenge them without killing them. I had one group of players, so I tried to make a challenge for them. I accidentally offended them a little bit because I gave them too easy a fight. Seriously. I have seen and heard from experienced players who have lost characters at low levels simply because they made a single mistake. And meanwhile, at high levels, yes, it's tougher to kill characters, but it's not, I repeat, not you versus them. You have more tools to challenge them, which means that, yes, they're tougher, but so are their threats. By challenge, I mean, like, give them a cool story, because D&D is all about that, making a good story. That'll be all for now. Have a good day.